before I got out of the service, before I come home. And the Fitchburg Sentinel got a wind of it. Well, I don't know how, but that's very neat. Anyway, I ended up in the Worcester North Bank, which was right in the center of Fitchburg, right where the lights are.
Yeah, the triangular building, right?
Yeah, well, no, that's further down.
Yeah.
This is right in front of the Johnsonia building, which was from Ivor Johnson years ago. It was built by Ivor Johnson. And I worked at Ivor Johnson's store. So Pete Lyons, he was a veteran of World War I. I sent this stuff home, and he had it put in the Fitchburg Sentinel. The flags, all the trophies, and all the stuff that I sent home. Now, all of these things that I got here, a good percentage of it was taken out of the supply room of an SS camp.
Wow.
And the 82nd Airborne, I think this is what they call a Screaming Eagle. They got there before we did at this SS camp, and they ramshackled everything. But a lot of the stuff was still in boxes right on the shelves.
Wow.
It was never issued out to the troops.
And this was in Germany?
This was, this was in Austria.
In Austria, okay.
Because actually, Hitler, what they call Berchtesgaden, his home, and where he could overlook, he was almost on the mountaintop. And Goring's place was only a short ways away. And I don't know why they set this up there, but this was Berchtesgaden.
I see.
And this military camp was within sight of Berchtesgaden. You could see the side of the mountain where the Hitlers had their stuff. And this is where I ended up when the war wasn't even officially over yet. I was in Berchtesgaden. And the fact is, his troops, the SS troops, had burned a lot of it. It was smoke. It was still smoking when I got to Berchtesgaden because they were trying to burn off all the files and records.
Right. I'm sure they were.
Okay. And we got a hold of some of the champagne that was in this place, and we were drinking it like ginger ale. You know, it foamed up, and it was funny because we have this is crazy. The war is not even over yet.
That's nuts. So, by the way, we're talking to Bob Goguen here. Bob lives on Foster Road in Ashby. It's May 22nd, 2003, and we're talking about Bob's experiences during World War II. I'm John Okerman from the Ashby Historical Society, and thanks for coming in today.
Okay.
So this stuff was in Fitchburg then, and it was on display. You guys heisted it from an SS camp.
Well, let's say it's spoils of war.
Yeah, sure, that's right. That's good.
Heisting don't sound right.
No, yeah, all right. Well, you drinking champagne and doing what came natural.
If I had saved that bottle, it'd be worth some money.
That's right. That's right.
But anyway, that's beside the point.
Now, you told me earlier there was some famous insignia you had in here from what was that? From Goring or
No, it was a rank. I had his whole, not Goring. This was Himmler's jacket.
Heinrich Himmler, yeah.
Heinrich Himmler. And he was the head of the SS. And he made his own rank design.
Yeah.
He wore it on the lapel.
He was the only
He was the only one that had that rank because he designed it. And I didn't know that at the time. I was going through all the clothes and all the junk and picking up stuff and putting it in a bag. I was going to send it home. So I just took the insignia, the rank collar on his lapel of the jacket. I should have kept the whole jacket.
Yeah, sure.
And I just took the ranks off and threw it in the bag along with other generals' ranks and stuff, whatever I could, and flags. And there was so much stuff that you don't know where to start.
Yeah.
But anyway, I sent it home, and this is it.
This is some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, when did you join up?
19,
Let's go back even further.
Okay, all right. Let's go back to basic training. I tried. I dropped out of high school because I wanted to go into service.
Ashby High School.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I went home, my mother she had to sign the papers for me to go in, and she wouldn't sign it. She says, "You can't stay home. You got to go back to school." I said, "No, I don't want to go back to school." So I took a job in Fitchburg at the Ivor Johnson Sporting Goods. store. And I worked there till I got drafted. When I got drafted, according to it, I went and, let's see, let's get this straight now. I was working at the store, I got drafted, went in, took basic training at Camp Landing, Florida. And from there, they shipped me to, after basic training, they shipped me to Arkansas, Camp Robinson, Arkansas. And I thought we were going to head to the West Coast, and I was going to be out in the Pacific somewhere, you know, because the war was going pretty good out there at the time. They shipped me back to Fort Meade, Maryland, come east, and from Fort Meade down to Newport News, Virginia. Got on a boat, the next thing I know, we landed in North Africa.
1942?
42.
Yeah.
And the war was going on there, but I was sent over there as a replacement because during the war, guys get wounded, taken out of combat, got a replacement with other men.
Now you were Army infantry, is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. And from North Africa, we invaded Sicily.
How long were you in North Africa? Did you go all the way across North Africa, chasing the African
Well,
war?
I landed at Casablanca, and
Yeah.
from there, Rommel was on the other side, toward Cairo, that way.
Yeah, yeah.
And well, where we landed, we landed where the Vichy French were in North Africa at the time. And we were being fired on by the French Navy. That didn't last too long. A couple of days, it was over. But from there, we lost a few people, but not too many. It was a crazy war. And we went from there. I went to Bizerti. I ended up at Bizerti. From Bizerti, we hit Sicily.
Now, was this summer when you were over there?
It was in the fall.
In the fall. Was it hot? This is the desert of North Africa, yeah?
It's very hot during the day,
Yeah.
but the nights are cold
Huh.
because you're not far from the Mediterranean Sea. So,
Did you have any R&R time there? Did you get a chance
No.
to? No, nothing.
no,
Nothing.
And from Sicily, well, when we got to, there was a race between Patton, which I was under, on Patton Group, and Montgomery. He was ahead of the
British.
English.
Yeah.
It was a race to who could get to Sicily as fast as we did. And Patton really pushed. He really pushed. He didn't like Montgomery at all. It was a race between them.
That's right.
Considered it a race to get to Palermo. Okay? So we were the first ones at Palermo. In fact, as we were in Palermo before, Patton could get there. He'd come in there with the newsreels.
Yeah, there's the famous scenes with
Yeah.
Patton rolling into
He
Palermo.
got kind of like this, you know, and we were sitting at sidewalk cafes in Palermo drinking vino. But they didn't show us doing it.
So you got there in
You didn't
advance of
see
the
us
cameras and you were all
didn't
drunk.
see us in the newsreel. Anyway, after Palermo, straight to Messina.
Now, let me ask you something, Patton. This is just from the movie about him and from some of the stuff I read when I was younger. Had a reputation for being blood and guts. His guts and our blood, kind of thing. Was that what was the sentiment among you and the guys you were fighting with about George Patton?
Well, they figured his guts and our blood.
Right. So that was really it. Then, huh? Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah.
I mean, he kept him on the run. See?
Yeah.
And our outfit made another landing, cut him off before, and it was crazy. We shouldn't have done that. We took a hell of a chance. We were lucky.
Yeah.
But the Germans, we kept them on a run through in Sicily, but when we landed at Salerno, the Germans were waiting for us.
Salerno was your risky maneuver, you mean?
It was an amphibious landing.
Yeah, sure.
And the Germans knew where we were going to land. They had all the guns up in the highlands. They dropped in on us. They dropped that stuff in the bay, and it was pretty much of a fiasco to begin with.
Right. Were you in the beginning of that assault, you know?
Yeah, well, we came in after the 36th got to land in Salerno, and they would get. They were having a hell of a time, so we come right in behind them, and we pushed in. But we lost some people and some equipment. And from there on, all the way up the Italian booths, it was either rivers that we had to cross, or we had mountains to climb. And the Germans always seemed to have the high ground. Well, naturally, they were retreating. They could pick their own place. They had the advantage.
With the Germans, then, this was an organized retreat. They were
organized.
definitely retreating.
The Germans
purposefully.
They never retreated without having a line to retreat back to.
Yeah.
An established line. A good topography was in their favor at all times.
Right. Yeah. So despite the fact that you were winning ground, it was
costing us a lot of men.
It was costly.
Yeah. Because at that time, Mark Clark was in charge, because Patton couldn't do much with his tanks in these mountain areas. Because what the Germans would do, they'd wait till all the tanks got going up these narrow roads, and they'd pick off the tank in the rear, so the other tank couldn't retreat.
Right.
They tried to retreat, they couldn't.
Now, were they doing this with 88s, with 88
Yeah,
millimeter?
oh yeah, those 88s were probably the best artillery they had. I mean, for accuracy and.
Were the Allies? Were you guys outgunned by the 88? You know, as far as the quality of the artillery, you know.
We had good artillery, but for the 88 was an anti-tank gun, anti-aircraft gun, anti-personnel, you name it. All they had to do was set the explosives on the head of the shell before they fired. That's what they couldn't do.
Yeah.
So those 88 took a lot of, caused a lot of casualties.
Sure.
And those 88s could penetrate our tanks.
Now, what were these tanks mostly? Sherman tanks, or?
No, German tanks.
No, the American tanks were what?
Well, mostly Sherman tanks, but they go through that much steel.
Yeah, the 88s.
Yeah, but the 88's this big around, projectile it hits.
88 millimeter.
But the core of it is what penetrated,
Right.
and that would explode. If you could get that head to explode on the outside of the steel, chances are it wouldn't penetrate. But you had to use sandbags, pack them around the top of the tank to detonate that shell when it hit, so it wouldn't penetrate the armor.
Ah, okay. I've often seen those and wondered why they had those. Okay.
That's the reason they had it.
Yeah. Now, as far as you went, how many people were there in your unit? And what were you up to during this whole assault, as it were, this whole chase?
I was first assigned to an 81 millimeter mortar group, which is, that's another thing. The Germans had a mortar that's very similar to ours. But in their mortars, they could shoot our shells if they got a hole of it. We couldn't shoot theirs, it wouldn't fit. Pretty good.
Yeah, it's slightly smaller than.
They could change a barrel of a machine gun in a matter of seconds. We had to strip hours to be able to change the down the barrel.
Yeah.
So that when in combat, when you have to change a barrel, and you take a long time doing it, could mean your life.
Yeah, sure.
What else you want?
Well, in some of these conflicts now, with the Iraq War and the weaponry that we have is so superior to these others. But in this conflict that you were in, it wasn't the case. It doesn't sound like that. Is that accurate?
You know, we had the best, all through the war, the best thing I could see was we had air superiority.
Right.
That made the big difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because those Stukas, these
The dive bombers.
Yeah, the dive bombers. You could shoot them out of the air if you know, but they had a demoralizing effect. Because when they went in and would dive, it sounded like a whole pile of people screaming.
Yeah.
And this was a sound unit that they had in the plane to do that.
Wow. What was Italy like at that point? Describe the countryside. Italy's the most beautiful place I've ever been. You know, I obviously wasn't at that point on your mind too much, but you know, what do you remember?
Well, as the line moved along, we didn't leave much standing.
Right.
I mean, there was a multitude of stumps and houses, these stucco houses without roofs.
Yeah.
And cattle, whatever cattle they had, would be, especially on Antioch Beach, they were stranded.
Yeah, sure.
When the people evacuated, they couldn't take their livestock with them.
See, I mean, you never really saw any civilians because everybody left Dodge.
Oh,
before
civilians stayed there. Some
Did
of them
they?
did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But
was it poor? Were they poor? Looking at the
Really,
villages you went through in Italy?
in Italy, what I found was you either had a lot of money or you didn't have any. There's very little middle class at that time.
Yeah, sure.
During the war.
Yeah.
Because I remember some of the chow lines that we had, and the kids, we had these garbage buckets, what you don't need, you throw in the bucket. The kids would be on the other side of the fence with your little bucket so you could, whatever scraps you can throw in with you, throw in the bucket. In fact, as I do a picture of one, I'll show it to you later.
Sure.
But food was very important.
Yeah.
But the countryside, where the people had, there was vineyards all over the place.
Yeah.
And seems that people there were living like we used to live 50 years before, maybe 100 years before. Describing a living out of the vines and the land.
So it was still just a rural farm type situation.
Yeah, except for the city.
Sure. Now you told me once that during this campaign, your unit got overrun, but you fell asleep in your foxhole and they missed you. What happened there?
It didn't get overrun. It was just that the Germans sent go out on these patrols to try to take prisoners and interrogate for information about units and where they are. And this, I hate to say this, but this was Christmas Eve. And we got a case of cognac. It was pretty strong, great whiskey, I guess it was called. And so we all chipped in $5 a piece and got out 2 bottles. Somebody went back and got them. So we got underneath this barn and we were celebrating Christmas Eve. I didn't know I was supposed to go on guard duty. So somebody got a hold of an instrument and I was playing guitar and singing with a bunch of guys. And they said, Goguen, you go on guard duty? This was about, I was supposed to go on guard duty at 11 o'clock. This was about 10:30. And I was feeling no pain. And I didn't think nothing of it until I went to stand up and I fell down. But they helped me put my coat on, strap my gun on over my shoulder, and put my helmet on, and stood me out in front of the building where I was supposed to post guard duty. And I was supposed to wake up somebody else after 2 hours, so they would have their 2 hours. Well, all I remember was that it was snowing like crazy. And they set me up against the wall of the barn. And I could feel the barn wall sliding up my back, like I was sinking. And I fell asleep. And it snowed. I got covered with about 2 or 3 inches of snow. So the Germans, we could see the tracks where the Germans walked right by, because the other guys were all
I must be getting ahead of things. You weren't in Italy anymore at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you were. Snowing in Italy. It must have been up north. Or
It was in the mountains.
Yeah. You sure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was that. It was cold.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. No, wait a minute. No, I wasn't in Italy. I was in France. I was in France at that. That was one time, yeah.
So you moved up through the Italian boot.
Yeah.
And then over to France.
Well, no.
No.
We went back to, we went as far as Rome. When Rome fell, when we captured Rome that night, the following morning we heard about the Normandy invasion. Okay?
Yeah.
And we were sent, we stayed in Rome for about a week. And then we were trucked back down to Naples by truck. And we got on we took amphibious training for a couple of days, and then we got on a boat in Italy, and in Naples. And the next thing I know, we hit southern France. We landed in Saint-Tropez, Marseille down there.
Yeah, yeah.
And
To resistance or just, not?
there was some resistance, but not much. Because the main part of the army was on maneuvers for what they told me, 10 miles inland. When they started coming down the beach, we had enough equipment on the beach at that time to start pushing in. So we chased them right up through the Rhone Valley. And it was, there's nothing good about war, but the war in France was a lot easier to take than the war in Italy.
Because of the topography or what
The topography had a lot to do with it, because we were going up the Rhone Valley, it was all little country farms, people living, they were living pretty good compared to people that were living in the city. One village after another, we finally caught up with the German army, and it was a convoy. It was almost 10 miles long. That's on the road. And P-47s came in there with the plane. And boy, we really did an awful job. Because there was no place to go. A lot of French people were
resistance?
harassing,
Yeah.
the best way they could.
Sure.
And as the Germans were going up, they lost their military vehicles. They were grabbing civilian vehicles. But the civilian vehicles at that time, they had these charcoal burners set up on the rear bumper. And they were burning some kind of coal or wood to make the gasoline motor run.
Wow.
There's some kind of
Sure.
crazy rate. And of course they were leaving them on the side of the road because it,
Now, the French were harassing the Germans, but what was it like in Italy? What were when you come through a village,
yeah.
the Italians, were part of the Axis, they fought with Germany. What was the mind of the people, the Italian people?
Well, this was, I was there before the Italians surrendered. I mean, there was a lot of surrendering in North Africa before we ever got to Italy.
Sure.
By the Italian army. They weren't putting up too much of a fight. So I'll tell you, there was we had some Italians in the outfit.
Italian Americans.
Yeah, and they could talk to these people.
Sure. And were the people happy to see you? I mean,
No, well, they had, I got something in here, really something. Some of them had two flags. They had a German flag and an American flag. Whichever way the line went, they'd hang the flag out the balcony.
I would too. Yeah. Why not?
That was self-survival.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
So anyhow, you went up through the Rhone Valley and probably the city of Lyon,
As
right?
far as Besançon, which is not too far from the Swiss border.
Okay.
And then we turned left. If we kept going, we probably ended up in Switzerland, and we couldn't do that.
Right. That's right.
It was neutral.
It's a nice place, but that's right.
Oh boy, it was really
this time, you've been there for 2 years, because
Yeah.
you started out in 19, sounds like the summer of 42,
Well,
and now we're up to, past D-Day, right? So we're 2 years later.
I
Did
still
you, now,
have-
was that one tour of duty at this point? Do you have to, did you
Well,
re-up?
there's no such thing as just
Yeah.
one, it's, you get, I don't know if you call it a tour of duty.
Yeah, what was the,
There was different, anyway, let me think now, let me get this straight. I got 7 battle stars out of 8, possible battle stars. So I was in a good part of the war. Every time you,
that's a lot of combat.
yeah, well, the 3 invasions, well, you're landing on enemy soil. I know it wasn't